Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to part 2 of Morning Break. Stay tuned because we still have lots to come.
Now it's time to introduce our guest for today. We have with us brother Ammar Nashed, who some of you may remember from his recitation during Areem. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me.
So, I first heard you recite during Muharram at Muhammadi Trust, actually. How long have you been reciting for?
I began reciting about 3 years ago, so maybe 2007, 2009. It was a spontaneous thing. Someone that was with me knew that I'd written something, so he just sort of pushed me to get up and read. Because we were in a CYC room, just the guys. We had a majlis at the time, and then he said, get up and read, you know. So I got up and read, and that was, from then I began reciting for a bit. So.
And how did you feel the first time you recited, and especially given that you hadn't rehearsed it necessarily?
Well, nervous every time, not just the first time, every time. Like you said, I had rehearsed it, so mistakes happened on the first time, and mistakes continue to happen. But it's a process, you know.
And what was your inspiration for getting into all of this? I mean, how did you start writing in the first place?
I began writing poetry when I was about maybe 10 or 7 actually, and it was nothing to do with Ahl Bayt initially to start off with. And then as I grew up, I started to write different topics of poetry, politics, life, all these kind of things. As I grew up, I started to see myself going in a direction of, you know, writing politics and all these things that are changing all the time, and maybe not such a good way to go. I realized afterwards, when I started to attend the English majalis of Ahl Bayt, I always wanted to write poetry in Arabic actually, but I was not skilled enough to do it. So I realized that there was English majalis going on, which I didn't even know about before. When you write about Ahl Bayt, alayhim salam, you've got so much to talk about. So as a poet, you sort of excel in that area. It's not like writing about something two-dimensional or one-dimensional. You've got something there that's endless, and it's constant, and it's always growing, and you find out more things about them. There's so much different aspects to talk about, so much different stories, so much things to relate to. So as someone who writes poetry, or artist, or anyone, if you select that area to describe or to as your inspiration, then you know you excel, and you have so much to write about. So Ahl Bayt became my inspiration at the end of the day, I think.
So do you, now that when you started writing about the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam, do you only write about them now, or do you still write poetry about other things, other aspects of your life, and other things that affect you as a person?
Let's just make one thing clear. I'm not a full-time kind of poet, because I actually write whenever it comes to me, and I don't sit down and choose when to write. The words sort of come whenever they come, and that's when I sit down and write. I do write about other things sometimes, but not so much now as I used to, because I don't feel so passionate about it now, and I feel more passionate about Ahl Bayt. You know, when you love something and you like something, it's not the same thing. I love Ahl Bayt and I like all the other things, so I don't feel so much passion and so much feelings for it. So the words don't come out as they used to, and they come out a bit meaningless basically compared to Ahl Bayt, writing about them, which is a sort of good and bad thing, because there are other things to talk about, realities today, which people need to know about. There's not so much platforms that I would be able to express these opinions. I've tried taking part in poetry in my area, but all of it was rap kind of style and everything. So I just stood back. I didn't join, because I asked the guy, what is it going to be about, and he said, you know, it's going to be rap and there's going to be music in the background. And I said, okay, fine. I thought it was a poetry thing, you know, so I took back. Ahl Bayt, alhamdulillah, there's some platforms at the moment where people can appreciate what you're writing, so I think I'm going to continue.
I remember one particular line of when you were reciting was, al-Baneen gave to Hussein for warriors to ease the pain. Could you tell us a little bit about that? I know I'm not doing it justice.
There was an event going on for the Shahada of al-Baneen, salamullah alayha. The guy told me about it 2 weeks in advance, which is fair enough, because normally sometimes they only give you 1 day in advance. They say you're reading tomorrow. He gave me 2 weeks advance. I was living away, and I was trying to write. Those was the only 4 lines that I wrote. Up until the last night, on a Friday night, I'd written nothing basically. and I was staying up until about 3 o'clock trying to write. I couldn't. So I actually had a conversation with Al-Fadl Abbas. I said, look, I'm going to put the pen down, I'm going to put the paper away, I'm going to go to sleep. Tomorrow, on my way back to London, you're going to come, you're going to write the poem for me, basically. And that's exactly what happened. I was on the train, and from when it was a 2-hour journey. From when I got on the train till I finished, the poem was there, alhamdulillah. I was, yeah, I don't know, it seems like you like it, so I hope you've done a good thing, inshallah.
I do, thank you very much. Would you be able to recite it for us?
I'll recite some of the in a poetic style, not in the Latmiya style. Al-Banin gave to Hussein 4 warriors to ease the pain. It's as if the angels were speaking to Al-Banin, as if Jibreel had descended, carrying with him a dream. In her lap were 3 planets and a moon shining so bright that the world was glowing white, illuminated from his light. She would soon discover what's the meaning of this metaphor. What was the light in her dream? What was the meaning of the 4? Abbas learned his braveness from Haydar, his father. So he did not hesitate when he was sent to bring the water. He arrived at the river and raised the water next to his lips, demonstrating that he had arrived and was able to drink it, but he refused to allow his soul to submit to desire, even though he was so thirsty that his heart could start to fire. She had wrote this on their veins, 4 warriors to ease the pain. She used the blood beside the ink. She used the sword beside the pen, and then she wrote this on their veins, 4 warriors to ease the pain. On his way back to the camps, the children's hopes were resting on him, but behind the tree there was an enemy thus waiting on him. With the sword they struck him, with the arrow they pierced him. They took the left, they took the right, they spilt the water and they left him. Hussein was racing like a lion when he came to Abu Fadl, found him dying, sat beside him, and he said his final farewell. She had sent them to remain, 4 warriors to ease your pain. From the start until the end, 4 warriors to ease your pain. To represent Banin, 4 warriors to ease your pain.
Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, no, that was really beautiful. I don't really know what to say after that.
Thank you.
So out of all the pieces of poetry that you've written, is there any particular one that stands out for you, or one that means more to you than any other? And if so, then why?
I wouldn't pick one over the other. I hope that they're all the same. And I hope that when I think of writing the poetry, I always believe that it's not good to give good comments about your own self. And I see a lot of people do that, but it's really something I don't like. I hope that something, a word, a space between the words, anything gets accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If that just gets accepted as a pure intention, I'll be happy. You know, I don't favor anything over the other, and I wouldn't like other people to do that as well, to compare between 2 poets or 2 poems.
Okay, so in your time reciting, you mentioned earlier that you feel nervous every time you recite. Have you ever done anything embarrassing or had any funny moments?
Growing up, again, back to the story of the poetry, actually my dad is a poet himself. Our whole family, we come from a family who are known for their poetry back home. So my dad was, I guess, mocking me when I was young, because we were having food and we had guests around, and we had the head of a lamb on the plate, and he said, oh, if you eat the tongue of the lamb, you become a poet. So I just stayed waiting. After the topic changed, I actually picked it up and took a bite out of the tongue of the lamb, believing that it was going to make me a poet, because I think I liked it from a young age.
It must have worked.
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure. Maybe he was just having fun with me, I think. Every time I used to go to, most of the times when I first started writing, I wasn't ready. I didn't know that I would be reading for a whole 10 nights. So I only had a few prepared, and they'll say to you, oh, you're going to have to read for 10 nights. So I would run out of poems, so I would write on the way to the majlis. I'll be writing my poems on the way to the majlis. Obviously, no time to prepare, no time to... So when I get there, I just used to make so much mistakes. Reading is just it's an experience, I think. I used to make so much mistakes, and basically, yeah, that was a bit embarrassing. Plus all the pressure and everything, and it's a new thing as well. English Latmiyat, obviously it's a new kind of thing, so we have to sort of set the standard. The people who are joining now, they have to set the standard.
Do you feel that audience participation is very important for you? Because I know when I saw you recite, you were asking everyone to join in with you and repeat certain words. Is that something that's quite key to when you're reciting?
Every kind of artist, every kind of poet, anything, you have to... I asked my dad once because he stopped writing for a little while when we came here. And I said to him, why don't you recite no more? And he said to me, look, can you sell fish in a market which is made for mobile phones? I said, no, I don't know what you mean. He said, look, if you're selling something, you have to have someone who wants to buy it. You have to have someone who's interested. If you're going to be reading and everyone's not interested, then you're not going to want to continue because no one's listening. That happens every day. It doesn't matter if you're a poet or you could be talking to someone as a friend. If they're not listening, you're not going to carry on. So obviously it's important that people take part. At the same time, it's important that I do my job properly. If I'm giving them something which is boring, then I don't blame them for not listening. Do you know what I mean? So we have to, I'm always aware of that when I'm writing, not to repeat myself, not to, I mean, for anyone who wants to write, it could be advice for them, not to repeat yourself, not to be boring, not to give topics which people don't understand maybe. Sometimes people talk too metaphorically that the actual thing that you're trying to describe becomes lost because people don't know what you're trying to say. So I do think it's important for people to join, and I think this year in Muharram, alhamdulillah, people are starting to accept it more. The English style of Latmiyat is getting there.
I was just going to say actually with the English Latmiyat, because it's not a very, you know, obviously traditionally, like in my culture, for example, we do Latmiyat in Urdu or, you know, in your culture maybe in Arabic. So the English is still relatively new. It's only been a few years. And I remember the very first time I heard Latmiyat in English, I thought, wow, that was really strange. I just couldn't connect with it. It just didn't capture my heart the way the Urdu recitations used to, you know. But I think they've really come a long way now, because also at the time when they first started, they were kind of English words trying to fit into the Urdu or the Arabic tunes, which didn't always necessarily work or fit. And I actually sometimes I found them more amusing than, you know, sad. But I think now they've really changed and improved, and they're kind of becoming a culture of their own. So not necessarily having to mimic or copy the traditional ones, but actually just inspirational on their own. I mean, do you feel like people are really starting to take up on that?
I still feel we have a very, very long way to go. The difference between English, Arabic and Urdu is English probably you can say is the most limited language in terms of having words available for the poet to use. So you don't want to keep using the same words, you don't want to repeat yourself. So it's a challenge for someone who's writing, and at the same time, the person who's listening, they can't listen to it and think, oh, this is, you know, this is funny or this is boring. I hope the person who wrote it done it with a good intention. That person, if he can do better, I think he should get up and try it, because it's not easy. I don't think it's easy, to be honest. It's really, really difficult. With the Arabic, you've got, for example, for a lion, I think we've got about 100 different names for a lion. Or, you know, a camel, we've got different, I don't know, God knows how many names. Just to give you an example, you've got a wide language to use. So much descriptive words, so much metaphors, so much values that we don't have in this kind of culture even. So you can't transpose these kind of cultures, these kind of values into the English kind of culture and expect it to work. It's just not going to happen. It's going to backfire actually, because...
So we know that you... talking about culture, we know that you were actually you went to Iraq, didn't you, for Arba'een, and you mentioned that your inspiration comes sort of spontaneously, doesn't it? Did you find when you were over there that it was really easy to write?
It was much easier to write, and the Latmiyah that I'm hoping to recite today is actually something that I wrote in about 5 or 10 minutes, and brother Raouf was with me there. He's a witness. He knew. He saw how it is basically me writing my poetry, and he saw it. We were getting up, and because I had to recite so much of my poetry, and I think basically, to be honest, I had nothing else to recite on that night, so I had to quickly write something on that night. In Karbala, it's weird, your emotions are up and down, you can't control it, you just feel sad for no reason sometimes, you just be sitting, you see any little thing and, you know, your emotions are high basically, as you can appreciate. So yeah, when you're in that kind of state, it's easier to write, you get more kind of feelings into your words, you get more, I don't know, more emotions, so it comes out better. Even the words, the way you put them together, they come out better because you're more emotional. So I think it was more inspirational there.
So you mentioned that you had to learn about something to put it into your poetry. Did you find that writing poetry has made you look into kind of the history of Islam more, so that you have more content within your poetry?
Yeah, it's an advantage because sometimes, to be honest, we don't know that much about Ahlul Bayt. Everyone knows, the general public, myself even, we only know about the main Imams, Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali alayhi salam, Hassan, up until baby Imam Zain al-Abidin story, and even maybe up until Ja'far al-Sadiq, yeah, for most of us, yeah. It gets a bit vague for us, and that's my honest situation, basically. You know about the Prophet Fatima Zahra and all that. Salaamullah alayhim. Up until a certain point, we haven't been so educated, to be honest. Even when you go to the majalis, they're not so focused on the other imams. They focus on a few imams, which is more than enough. I mean, just Imam Ali alayhi salam, yeah, just to focus on him. Look how far it's brought us. Fair enough, yeah, I don't blame them. But as well, we need to be educated in the history. So when you get called to recite about a certain imam and you don't know much about them, you have to go and do your research, basically, because you can't just talk about anything. You have to be accurate as well. I hope the people that do intend to write, be careful what they write, not to mislead people, not to write false information, and double check everything that they're saying is accurate, everything, because they're going to be responsible, basically. They've got a different position than someone who's listening. You know, someone who's listening, who's addressed by one person, is different from someone who's talking and addressing 100 people. Do you know what I mean? So they have to make sure that what they're writing is accurate. So I don't know, that's what I try to do, inshallah, to be accurate.
You make a really good point there, actually, about the accuracy of what you're writing about, because often you hear in Latmiyat things, and then sometimes on the mimbars, that somebody will say, actually, that person didn't exist, or that person wasn't at Karbala, or this event didn't take place. But I know from experience, and definitely in all the Urdu Latmiyat that I hear, there are numerous examples of events or people that are talked about or narrated that may not necessarily have been there. And I know that there's a book as well called The Misconceptions of Karbala, which is a really interesting read, because a lot of these things have come into the story, the narrations, even through either people narrating or from Latmiyat, and a little bit of poetic license, which in normal poetry is fine, but poetic license when it comes to relating historical events is not so fine, because actually when people hear it, they think that that's what's happened. So I think it's really great that you are careful about what you're writing.
Can I just add, when people, as Latmiyat, I think they've done a job of carrying the message of Karbala in a way that nothing else has. As a young person, that's your first attachment probably to Karbala, is through a Latmiyah. Sometimes the poet feels that he has to use metaphors to describe it, which is fine. If people understand, that's only a metaphor. At the same time, now he said that some people believe certain things happen which didn't happen, which is another problem as well, because that's what their attachment is. They're so attached to the story, that part of the story, they're so attached to it, but then you want to come and say to them, that's not true. The best thing is just not to write about it. If you believe it didn't happen, if you can prove it didn't happen, or there are sources that say that it didn't happen, best thing is not to write about it, which is a problem as well, because there's some things which are so commonly agreed upon that you just don't know what to write. When it comes to that person's story, you don't know what to write, because this is what everyone believes. So it's a bit...
Yeah, I can understand that must be difficult. Do you ever write, like qasidas, I don't know what you might call it in Arabic, but, for happy occasions, for births and, for wiladat?
I'm writing one at the moment just for the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's in the process, but it's my first one. It's a bit harder because the clapping and all that. It's a bit harder. I just feel it's a bit more not my comfort zone, to be honest. But I'll give it a try, inshallah. See how it goes.
Please, could you recite what you mentioned earlier that you would recite first, and could you also tell us a little bit about the background of that and where that inspiration came from?
Okay, basically when we were in Karbala, I'll be very brief as I can. We came out to do a quick ziyarah about 3 o'clock at night time, but on the way there we saw a group of people who were reciting Nazmiyah. Then another guy came and he basically took over and he started reading, and the style that he was reading, it was about Abu Fadl Abbas first, and then he was saying Abbas, Abbas, and then that was the chorus. Then he was going towards the shrine of Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam, which was very, very slow. You know, it was about 15 minutes or 20 minutes maybe just to get there. We got there, went all around the haram and everything. Then we left there and he started to change it to Imam Hussein, everyone. And people were sleeping, but when we walked past them, we headed towards the shrine of Imam Hussein. When we walked past them, even the old ladies, they would sit up, start doing latam with us and then go back to sleep. Then we got there, took another turn around the Imam's shrine. Then we went, he changed about Zainab alayhi salam, you know, Zainab, and then we went towards Tel Zainabiyya, and that's where we finished. All of that whole thing took about an hour or so, or more than that. So it was an experience like no other, I think. I wrote this Lazmiya based on that kind of style that he wrote. And it talks about Karbala on the first verse, and then Abu Fadl Abbas salam alayhi, and then Zainab. To be continued, inshallah, to talk about Imam Hussein, if I can find some words worthy for him. This land, this land, this land is a universe. This land, this land, this land is a universe. It's as if this land is a universe. Abbas is the moon, Zainab is the earth. Abbas will brighten up the darkest night, but the moon's role is to reflect the light, and the source of light for the moon is one. Abbas is the moon, Hussein is the sun. Abbas, Abbas, Abbas ya Abu Fadl. Abbas, Abbas, Abbas ya Abu Fadl. In this world there's not enough pages for me to begin describing your bravery. I have a question, brother, answer me. Will you let Yazid's army capture me? I am Abbas, I'm from Haidar Ali. I'll pick up this flag and I will rally. As the moon fades and the morning sun will rise, Sister Zainab, I promise what you will see will please your eyes. Zainab, Zainab, I'll call for eternity. Zainab, Zainab, I'll call for eternity. No one would survive if they'd seen what you saw. I am your servant standing at your door. Ocean of patience, I am at your shore. The ship of salvation I wish to board. It's the ocean of patience, I am at your shore. The ship of salvation I wish to board. I do not want Jesus or Noah's ark. It's Hussein's ship that I wish to embark. It's the only ship that won't drown through the years, because it's carried by Zainab's tears. Zainab, Zainab, I'll call for eternity. Zainab, Zainab, I'll call for eternity.
Thank you very much, Brother Ammar, for that moving recitation and for coming on the show.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, it's time for a short break now. Please join us for the final segment of the show, where we will have Ask the Life Coach and Book of the Week. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to part 2 of Morning Break. Stay tuned because we still have lots to come.
Now it's time to introduce our guest for today. We have with us Brother Ammar Nashed, who some of you may remember from his recitation during Arba'een. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me.
So, I first heard you recite during Muharram at Muhammadi Trust, actually. How long have you been reciting for?
I began reciting about 3 years ago, so maybe 2007, 2009. It was a spontaneous thing. Someone that was with me knew that I'd written something, so he just sort of pushed me to get up and read, because we were in a CYC room, just the guys. We had a majlis at the time, and then he said, get up and read, you know. So I got up and read, and that was, from then I began reciting for Ahl Bayt. I always wanted to write poetry in Arabic actually, but I was not skilled enough to do it. So I realized that there was English majalis going on, which I didn't even know about before. When you write about Ahl Bayt alayhim salam, you've got so much to talk about. So as a poet, you sort of excel in that area. It's not like writing about something two-dimensional or one-dimensional. You've got something there that's endless and it's constant and it's always growing, and you find out more things about them. There's so much different aspects to talk about, so much. So.
And how did you feel the first time you recited, and especially given that you hadn't rehearsed it necessarily?
Well, nervous every time, not just the first time, every time. Like you said, I had rehearsed it, so mistakes happened on the first time, and mistakes continue to happen. But it's a process, you know.
And what was your inspiration for getting into all of this? I mean, how did you start writing in the first place?
I began writing poetry when I was about maybe 10 or 7 actually, and it was nothing to do with Ahl Bayt initially to start off with. And then as I grew up, I started to write different topics of poetry, politics, life, all these kind of things. As I grew up, I started to see myself going in a direction of, you know, writing politics and all these things that are changing all the time, and maybe not such a good way to go. I realized afterwards, when I started to attend the English majalis of